Hi, my name is Jill, and I have a 24-year-old son named Britton who has autism. I would like to say that Britton is fairly high functioning. He's able to work at an entry-level position, and he tries to follow the rules, and he's very eager to please. He does not have any behavior issues, but he is far from independent. He's not a great problem solver, and he still needs lists and prompts for certain tasks. He can communicate, but he doesn't have a great memory for the day-to-day details. I tell you all this so that you have some sort of perspective on where I'm coming from and that you know a little bit about Britton. I think before I start, I'd kind of like to tell you that I try desperately to live in the present. And I try to tackle what's in front of me on a day-to-day basis instead of looking to the future, because I think that if I did that, I might be crazy.
So how prepared were you for transition?
Well, transition is overwhelming. There's so much to think about, and so much to do when your child turns 18, but you really have to start thinking about it as soon as they're diagnosed. We'll talk more about that a little bit later, but when they turn 18, you really have to start working on guardianship, social security income, or supplemental security income as SSI for when they turn 18, jobs or a day program, or what activities they're going to do to replace the school, housing, transportation, wills, special needs trusts, waiver programs a lot of times, therapies, what's going to replace the therapies from school, and their future, like what's going to happen to my kid when I'm gone. Honestly, I wasn't nearly as prepared as I'd like to say that I wanted to be, but that's probably because I was overwhelmed and paralyzed in so many areas. It is like getting hit by a Mack truck. Finding the resources in all the areas and knowing what to do first is so hard. There isn't a checklist or a to-do list that anybody's put together on how to navigate all this. There's not even really a great resource guide. It's getting so much better. And there's people and professionals out there who are now like teaching workshops on that. But to be honest, sometimes they're placing the fear in you just to get your business. So you go to these workshops and you come out in tears, or I came out in tears because I was so overwhelmed and I felt like I had so much to do, and they used scare tactics, and then I would just come out in tears crying because I didn't know where to start, and I was so afraid I was going to mess something up. And you know, those resources are very expensive too and time consuming. But I would say that getting plugged in early is really the key. But even that can be hard because you've got to get plugged into the right places for you. Because there are going to be people who are going to push you to believe what they believe and do what they do. And you have to make your own decisions for what's best for you and for what's best for your child. And the pressure I'm going to continue using that stupid word, overwhelming. It can be overwhelming. But you know, there's so many options: biomedical, ABA, gluten-free, casein-free diets. Those were all the buzzwords when Britton was little. And so you have to pick and choose what works best for you and the groups that fit best with your personality and your needs at the time. And then you have to believe in yourself and know that you're doing the best the best that you can for your kid at the time.
So how helpful was the school district in helping support the transition?
You know, a lot of it is what school you go to and the special ed staff at each of the schools. So I'm going to really try to talk kind of generically about that. First of all, our PPCD teachers were the key to helping us get plugged in when Britton was diagnosed. They actually basically held our hands and took us to our first Autism Society meeting, and that was huge. That's how we got plugged into the community, and that's how we were initially given a lot of our information about autism. It was a great resource. I think the number one rule, and I'm pretty sure the school district told us this, but we'll touch base on that later. Number one rule is to get on the Medicaid waiver program list, and making sure that you do that as soon as your kid's diagnosed. But the whole thing was we were told that, but we weren't really told why that mattered or what it even meant. All I can say is it's probably a 15 to 20 year waiting list right now, from the time that you get on the list till the time that you get services for your child. And we did it when Britton was 9, and it took 11 years to get him on the list. And we didn't do it when we were first told to do it, simply because we were bombarded with papers and all kinds of just information, but none of it really made sense to us. The school district touched on a lot of these things, handed out the proper paperwork that they were supposed to. Sometimes it kind of felt like they were just checking off the box. Now, you know, their job is to teach our kids, probably not to teach the parents. So it's a fine balance. Handouts were overwhelming. You know, I feel like the school district would mention the things that they needed to mention, but maybe didn't help facilitate how you did that, or gave you like really any details. For example, what was the this number that I called to get on the list? I didn't know what the list was. All I knew was, don't ask what the list is, just call and get your name on it. So that's what we did. And then there were times that I would ask questions, and they'd kind of push it off and say, oh, you know, we'll worry about those things later. That was later, once we got into transition. So it'd be like, oh, you know, we need to do all this stuff. And I'd hear about all this stuff, and they'd kind of touch on it. And then when I'd ask more detailed questions, they'd say, we'll work on that after he graduates. So I would say that there was a huge transition once he got out of high school and he moved into the transition program. And that's when things for me really changed. It's when we stopped talking about things and actually started doing things.
So how important is it, or was it to you, to have a vision of what Britton's future needed to look like?
Well, for me, I think the first time I made a quote vision board was probably really early on, when I had a lot of fear about what his future was going to look like, when I felt a lot out of control. So this was early on, most likely when I was finding out all this information that I needed to do, but we weren't there yet. So I made a vision board, and this is kind of it. But you'll see it's kind of, you know, trying to get me pumped up, and it was more to get me started. Like, what's his life going to look like? What do I need to do? The future's going to be tough. I need to have guts. I need to give it a voice. I need to start getting the discussion going. I need to do all these things so that I can feel better and find something special. And see, here I am, like working on less stress and surrendering and kind of mindfulness. This was in my state of fear and anxiety about what Britain's future was going to look like. And this really helped me put it on paper about, taking what I needed to do to take the first step. So this was, relying on people, learning how to start talking about it and thinking about it and making baby steps. So that's my first one. Then I made an even bigger one. This was in 2015. So Britton graduated from high school in 2016. And this is before we bought our house. But you can see this was when the goal was housing for him. What are we going to do? We're going to, I'm not going to stress about it. I'm going to work on making a difference. And everybody has mountains to climb. It's totally possible. Can do energy, spread your smiles, building a future for our kids together. This was my vision board before we bought the house and before we started the house. And how to protect my kid and making a home, making a difference. So this is really kind of what got me energized and passionate about our house and more the vision for Britain's future. So that's what got me started, really thinking about his future son.
Why don't you give me some specifics about things that changed for you in Britain once he entered into the transition program?
Okay, I think that's when things got really real for me. And the transition teachers really pushed me and forced me out of my comfort zone. And they were like, okay, you need to be, they were showing me some things that I was doing to hold him back. So the first challenge that they gave me was to let Britton come home from school riding the bus. He rode the special ed bus, but instead of me meeting him at the mailbox and waving, saying hi to the bus driver, they said, okay, you need to not be home when he gets home from school. You need to give him a key and let him come into the house all by himself and lock the door without you being there. So that was step one, which was huge for me. I was deathly afraid of that. And then number two, when he actually went to, at the time he went to college. So he spent the first year of transition actually at his home school. And that wasn't a huge transition. The big transition was then when he went to the off-campus transition program at College. And they required that he took DART to the school. And so for Britton, because he's not super responsible and he's not a great problem solver, that is DART paratransit, because he is not capable of riding the bus and changing from one bus to the other, or getting off the rail and getting a bus to someplace else, or crossing streets on his own. He's just not capable of that. So he rides, he still rides DART paratransit, and the transition program made him ride DART paratransit door to door from our house to the school, and then from the school back. So that was a huge step for us. The third thing that the transition program did for us was gave him work and volunteer experience, took him out in the community and actually made him do jobs. And really, I think the work that he did wasn't a big, huge jump, but he got a volunteer job at the hospital, which was his big dream job. And that was huge to see him be successful in that and independent and love what he did, that was just amazing. And then a big thing that this is one of the things that I talked about that started out early and we never made any progress with it, but we were meeting with the DARS people, the Department of Aging and Rehabilitation Services, I think is what it stands for. There's a million of these little acronyms for things. Oh, one of those pieces of paper that's shoved at you that's overwhelming. But we had been meeting with the DARS people since he was in high school, doing kind of career plans. And this is hilarious because up until he got into the transition program, when it talked about what he wanted to be when he grew up, he was going to be a magician, he was going to be a comedian, he was going to be a massage therapist, he was going to take people's blood pressure. I mean, all of it was so random. I'm like, can we not work on things that are really reasonable that he's going to be? But getting in touch with DARS and working towards a goal of him having a job was a really big deal.
Were there resources or help from the school district that you wish you would have gotten, had from them to help in Britton's transition?
When I started thinking about this, I was like, wow, I kind of had a big list. But then when I started to really process it, I remember, I was trying to take things one day at a time, and the resources kind of followed that way. So in the beginning, I was doing, some of the trainings, social skills trainings, social stories trainings, things that I needed, information about autism, things that I needed as Britton grew up. And, they did, I even remember them doing the summer information. I think it was them and not, I think the school district finally started doing that. The Autism Society had been doing it a long time before the school district started doing that. That was a huge thing. And I don't know if they're still doing it, but summers can be overwhelming for working parents. And I was a single mom for a period of time, and I worked. I had to work. So I needed a lot of resources outside of the school and I needed a lot of help with that. But so if in reality, I think my biggest thing would have been if I could have had a little bit of more information about all the papers that were kind of being thrown at me. So a little bit more explanation about what the waiver program was. Really, as far as the transition part, there's so much that gets overwhelming at that point in time. But I think that there's so much information about it and it's very specific. But maybe I just wish there was a central list of resources in each area as far as who can you go to get help with guardianship and supplemental security income and places for your kids to go in the summer, or programs that are available outside of the school district once they're out of there, so that you can feel like you can make an educated decision about what might be best for your kid. I got very lucky and got plugged into a summer program early on when it got started, and I used to cry every summer when it was time to transition from the school year to summer, because I never knew what I was going to do for Britton, and I would move him from one thing to the next, and I'd go pick him up from one thing and have to take him someplace else, and then figure out how I was going to go get him before I was off of work. And it was crazy, and I spent a lot of money on the things that I could do just to fill his day, because there wasn't a full-time thing for him to do at the time. But I think the biggest thing would be just a more condensed version of something. And I don't know, maybe that's my calling to help put that together. But maybe they have that now, but they didn't at the time. So those things were quite overwhelming, and I put them off and didn't start getting his benefits early because I was paralyzed with what do I do? Can I do this by myself? Do I have to hire somebody to help me with it? Where do I start? The paperwork is crazy.
So what opportunities were there for post-school, after high school, during transition, and how easy or reasonable was it to access them?
Okay, this is a doozy. It's such a hard topic because so much of this depends on what functional level your kid is at, the behavior issues that you're faced with, and honestly, money. I think if you have money, there's a lot of opportunity out there. The problem is, when you're planning for your kid's future, if you're not a gazillionaire, funds are limited, and which means your resources are limited. So I think the first thing that I focused on was, would Britton be able to work? And the transition program did a really good job with that. They did like the career and personality testing to help decide, what kind of place would work best for Britton. And his came out for customer service, which is a huge range of things. We actually used DARS, and with DARS, you pick I don't want to call it a provider, but a company that will do job training and job coaching and job search for your person with special needs. And we had a almost 1 year waiting list with this the company that we decided to use, but it was the best. You have to be super careful in that area because there's a big list. You're given the list. People want their kid working right away, and so they don't want to wait for a year. But if you get the wrong job coaching, job training person, then your kid's first experience with a job might not be successful. And then what do you do? So we were on the waiting list, and they helped us find a job for Britton, and they job coached him, and they still go monthly and job train him and follow up with the company that he works for and the managers there. And if we ever have problems, they're there for us. Another huge thing is how much is your child able to work and how much is your child able to earn, because there are limits with their SSI. They can't earn over a certain amount of money, or they're going to lose their Medicaid waiver program, their Medicaid benefits, and their SSI benefits, which today may not matter, but if you lose it and you can't get it back when I'm not here anymore, then Britton doesn't have the resources that he needs to exist. I can't even get started with that because it makes me so fearful. But it is, they have a limited amount of time that they can work and a limited amount of money that they can make. So that's a whole nother, topic. But outside of work, there are day programs, and a lot of that, just like I said, it depends on whether your kid has behavior issues, at what functional level they are, and the resources, the monetary resources that you have. I mean, some programs take Medicaid waiver money if you have, if you've made it to the top of the list and you have Medicaid waiver money. Many programs don't take waiver money, so it's all out of your pocket. Another big thing is the hours of the programs. For a working full-time parent, you're going to have to leave your job early to go to take and get there late to take your kid and pick your kid up, because if they take the Medicaid waiver program, their hours are limited, from 8 to 2 maybe, or 9 to 3. It's a 6-hour limit for the Medicaid waiver program. There are many programs that will not take a behavior issue kid. If your kid has behavior issues, you have to send an aide with them to the program, and you have to pay for that. So it's an additional cost. Some of it is, there are programs out there that may be good and safe and clean, but they might be for a completely different type of kid than yours. So sending your kid to that program, they may be bored all day long. There are other programs that take the kids out in the community. They volunteer, they go do things. They're very interactive out in the community. They cost more money. I kind of put together a list of different programs, and I'm not going to list the programs specifically, but I was looking at the costs of some of the different programs. And I wasn't looking at bottom of the barrel either. I wanted decent programs and nice facilities that were more at the level that I might put Britain at. So the least expensive one that I found was $35 a day, and they run from 9 to 3. That's about, if you average it out, that's about $700 a month. There is an $80 a day program, and that runs from 9 to 4 every day. That's the one that happens to take the kids out in the community and does a whole lot of interactive stuff with them. It's $1,600 a month on the average. Now, I will say that so that comes out to $80 a day if you do the math. The Medicaid waiver program, called HCS, Home and Community Services, I believe it stands for, pays a different amount depending on the functional level of your kid. You get a day rate, I believe. I know they do for companion care, and I think for day programs it's the same thing. Britain's coverage is $28 a day, which comes out to $560 a month. So that will pay for $560 a month for a day program for him. Like I said, it's a huge gamut of things. Whether they're up and coming and growing and not able to take kids with behavior issues now, or if they and medically fragile. You have to look at medically fragile too, because that takes a whole nother level of care. I'll go into a little bit more of that, because I'm waiting on some more information from different people who actually have kids that are behavior issue kids who can't go to some of the more known programs around here. There is always Parks and Rec. So Plano Parks and Rec has always been a resource that we've used. In the beginning, they had 2 different day camps during the summer that both of my boys went to, and they're much more reasonably priced. So I looked into them. They have a 1 day a week program that's from 11 to 3, And then they have a continuing ed / lunch program that's another day a week. And those are from like 10 to 2 if you take the biggest one. So that gives something for a kid who's not in an everyday program to do 2 different days a week. But like I said, they're 11 to 3 or 10 to 2. So it also depends on what the parents are doing. They're a little bit more cost effective. And I'm not sure at what functional level they allow there. There are some other options outside of the community, some other resources that I've used that aren't like day program or work, but there are different things. So there's an organization called CPSH. It's Community for Permanent Supported Housing, and they have done, their main goal now is housing for families, or for we'll call them young adults or adults with special needs. They have done a great job on trying to get like-minded families together and come up with different options for housing for people. There is used to be a continuing ed program through one of the summer camps, but I think they've actually changed that now to socials, and that was a weekly thing, 2 sessions a year off during the summer. There is a new place called Special Strong that works on nutrition and personal training. It's expensive, it's good. It's one-on-one training with our special kids. There is a gym, thankfully close to our house, that actually works through Plano Parks and Recs, who does once a week training with special needs kids, and they do one-on-one, and they're super good with the kids. There's been a lot of parents who've come together to try and come up with, well, CPSH is a parent too. Actually, My Possibilities was started by 3 parents together looking for a place. But I mean, there are places that just don't fit for every kid. So I know a mom who has started her own program out of her home, out of her garage, for her son, and hired one-on-one attendants to help train him and get him doing something. So it just, a lot of it depends on, like I said, where you are financially and what you can give, and the time that you have to do yourself, and whether you have Medicaid waiver money or not.
So you purchased a house for Britain in a reasonably nice neighborhood. Why did you choose to do that as opposed to some of the other housing options that are available?
Well, let's see. That's kind of a multi-level answer. I guess first and foremost, I had been looking, and I didn't feel like there was another option out there for us. Whether it be financially, we weren't able to do it, or I just didn't feel like it was a great fit for Britain, or they maybe they didn't take waiver money, and we felt like Britain needed a caregiver. He was fairly high functioning, but not independent enough to live even in a community, in a home by himself or an apartment by himself. We felt like he needed somebody living with him. So we got very lucky, and the house next door to us came on the market, and we bought it, and we said, you know, we're going to rent it out until Britain is ready. And all along, he's had one really good friend that he's had since kindergarten, and his name is Barrett, and Barrett's mom and I have been close since kindergarten, and our goal was always that the boys would kind of live together. And so, we wanted a safe place. We wanted a teaching house. So we wanted the boys to continue learning once they left our house. We wanted to be able to pick the people that he lived with. We wanted a safe location, a community that knew him and his roommates, and a community that was comfortable with special needs kids. And we wanted it close to the DART rail and DART access and the DART community. So a lot of these areas are not DART accessible. Frisco, McKinney, Allen, there is no DART. Let's see. We wanted a caregiver in the home, if I didn't say that. It was a place that they were going to continue to be pushed and continue to learn. And sometimes other people can teach your kid better than you can teach them. They act better with other people than they do, more determined, I think, with others than they might be with their own parents. And, push them out of their comfort zone. And we wanted, it was super important that we had like-minded parents. We wanted all of us to be on the same page as far as what we wanted for the future for our kids, and that we were willing to be there and kind of co-parent. So your kid is my kid. I have the same expectations for your kid that I do for mine. If your kid needs to be picked up from work, I'm there if you're not able to do it. Also that we were all willing to cover. And to be honest, the boys have been in the house for 1.5 years, and we're now on our 3rd caregiver. So it wasn't an easy transition in the beginning. We had 2 unsuccessful caregivers before we had this one, and the moms have been over at that house covering and teaching and taking them places and picking them up and working on the goals, and it was quite a learning experience, I have to say. But it was good. We needed it. We needed to see exactly how our kids functioned together, what their strengths were and what their weaknesses were, and be willing to be honest with the other parents as to, your kid's not, this strength is not their strength. You're not being super realistic about this, or, so we needed to be really honest and very real. And it's made us look at our kids from an outside perspective, because so many houses fail because parents haven't been honest with the caregivers about what functional level the kids are at, and the goals of the kids. And we co-parent. We meet together and we strategize about what's working and what's not working, and what we need to do. And it doesn't matter what kid it is. If we're having an issue with one kid, it's an issue for all 3 parents. And so that was huge for us. And at the same time, we wanted all 3 kids at about the same level. Now, of course, every one of them has different strengths and different weaknesses, but we felt like because it's a teaching house, they all needed to be at a certain level so that we could have the same expectations across the board for all of them. So doing their own laundry, cooking for the house, shopping for the house, chores. They clean. They have a checklist, and they rotate chores every week. And, something's required for them. Their caregiver is not the maid, not the mama. as we say. So, that was a big deal.
So, as you kind of look forward, what do you see the long-term goals for you and Britain to be?
Ooh, okay, so my biggest fear, and I'll probably get emotional about this, is what's going to happen to Britain when I die. It can be paralyzing if I let myself go there, and if I let myself stay there for a really long time. If I'm in my head too much, that fear can be all-consuming. But at the same time, I have to be prepared. I have to think about that. I have to make plans, and I've got to figure it out, because it's not just going to happen. So it's a huge balance for me. Working on the goals, but not staying stuck in that paralyzed fear. So, I think my goal for Britain is kind of the same as for any parent, except for the fact that I need to know he's safe. He's going to be safe. He's going to be financially secure or stable. God, that I don't screw up something on his SSI or his Medicaid waiver program, so that he continues to be able to have the benefits that he has now when I die. Because today, we might be able to afford to pay for it, but when we're gone, we don't. We have 2 special needs kids that we have to take care of. That there's going to be somebody out there who's willing and able to do all the stupid paperwork that's required, the annual guardianship paperwork, to be his guardian, the annual Social Security paperwork. It's a lot. Calling Social Security once a month to report his wages and to keep up with his expenses, so that when you're reporting all this information to the courts and to SSI, that you have accurate information, and he's living within his means, and all of that. I mean, it's so much. It's so much for me, let alone how am I going to ask and depend on somebody else to understand all of this and to get it done and to not screw it up. It's horrible. But beyond that, what I want is for him to be able to survive and to thrive and to be happy and to be well cared for and to be loved and to know that he matters and to feel like he matters and that he's made a difference, and just that he's loved.